Shabbat Shalom, everyone. This Shabbat, we are all up for a very special treat because we are very honored and very blessed to have in our presence Wendy Sachs, who is the director and executive producer of the documentary film October 8. Wendy has earned Emmy nominations and awards for television producing, writing. She's a noted author and speaker. She co-directed and produced Surge, a feature documentary about the record number of first-time female candidates who ran, won, and flipped their red districts to blue in the historic 2018 midterm elections. That film was acquired by Showtime in 2020. Wendy also produced the 2-hour documentary Gen Z for the series My Gen that aired on MSNBC in October of 2024. She produced the 2-hour documentary Move Fast and Break Things, which is a Facebook documentary that aired in CNN and Vice TV as well. Before she was working on these level films, Wendy was a Capitol Hill press secretary, and she is the author of 2 critically acclaimed books about women and career. The first one is Fearless and Free, and the second one is How She Really Does It. Wendy has appeared on dozens of radio segments, TV shows, and podcasts, including NBC's Today Show, MSNBC's Morning Joe, CNN, Fox, and ABC's Good Morning America. Wendy resides in South Orange, New Jersey, with her husband Michael and their 2 children, Jonah and Lexi. And I will tell you that Wendy has been making the rounds to all of the major networks and shows in the wake of the release of October 8th. She's been with Donnie Deutsch, she's been on Dan Senor's Call Me Back podcast, she's been on Morning Joe and all the other morning shows. So the fact that you're with us at Temple Emanu-El, I don't know if it's going to do the same impact on your resume, but it does touch all of our hearts, and it is a great honor to have you with us today. Please join me in welcoming Wendy Sachs. Wendy, before we begin, this synagogue is a new building, but it has historic pieces to it. And the most notable is this beautiful dome, which came from the Brooklyn Jewish Center. It's well over 100 years old. And it is our centerpiece. It's a protector for all of us. So we have a small token of our appreciation, which is a silk scarf that's handmade. And it is a replica of this dome, and we hope that you know that you and Mike are always welcome here, and may it always protect you, and may it always keep you. Thank you. I'm going to put it right here for you. I have 2 questions to get us rocking and rolling. It should be on. The first one is, have you ever worked in the Jewish sector before? I know you've worked with Jews before. Have you ever worked in the Jewish sector before, which basically this is to a degree? And talk to us a little bit about some of the successes that the movie has seen, because if you've seen the movie, it's hard to walk out not deflated. But I think if we hear about how many people have seen it and where it's streaming and the impact it's had, it might buoy us a little bit.
So this is my first film in the Jewish space. It's my first, I would say, in my career, I've never worked in the Jewish world before, but my origin story is that I fell in love with Israel when I was in high school. I went on a program called the Alexander Muss High School in Israel program. Yeah, HSI, give it up for HSI, it's amazing. Transformative experience. My family had never been to Israel. I'm not one of the people who, says I'm the child of survivors or the grandchild of survivors. I don't have any family in Israel. I do now because I married into that, but I didn't growing up. Grew up totally secular, went to a Jewish day school, but a Reform one. And my mom wanted to make sure that I went to Israel, so I went to a program when I was going into my senior year of high school. And I heard about AIPAC, actually, when I was there, because it was all about campus activism. And I thought, I'm going to sign up for that when I go to college. And I did. And I became an AIPAC intern and an activist on campus. But I was also a journalism major. And I went to Northwestern. I went to the journalism school. And I was very political on campus, too. But there was really a church and state divide back then. But at the same time, we didn't have the issue of finding that being a Zionist and being a progressive was mutually exclusive either. Like, that was completely fine. So that's all I had done as far as like my Jewish pro-Israel stuff. Then I went on to Capitol Hill and in news and all of those types of things. As you mentioned in my long resume, it seems like I can't hold a job because I've done so many different
Not
things.
at all. Not at all.
When it's all rattled off together. But yeah, no, this is my first time doing anything in the Jewish world, and I felt like I had to. I mean, October 7th happened. I was visiting my daughter at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. It was game day. We were ready to go pregame at 9 a.m. and we opened up our phones and we saw the rocket alerts. We have the rocket alert app on our phone. My husband actually, full disclosure, he works for APAC, so he's in Israel quite often, and his phone was blowing up with red dots everywhere. And we saw the images coming out of southern Israel. And it was bizarre. It was like this epic moment for all of us. And what had happened was I found out early on that day, and I'm giving you all this sort of inside information, because my husband Michael was reaching out to members of Congress to have members of Congress sign on to a letter to support Israel on October 7th. And a really easy letter to sign on to, like a no-brainer. Like they were just attacked, let's support Israel. And you mentioned I did this film, Surge, which was about all of these women running for office for the very first time, Democrats. And the big winner of my film was a woman named Lauren Underwood, the youngest black woman to ever get elected to Congress. And she and I had become friends over the years, and she'd used my film, my documentary was like a love letter to Lauren. She's incredible, charismatic, all of the things. And on that day, on October 7th, I'm hearing from Michael that Lauren's not signing on to that letter. And it's breaking my heart, and I start texting her. Ultimately, she does sign on. But then I find out that she's not signing on to another letter a few weeks later about anti-Semitism, a really easy, another like low-hanging fruit, easy to sign on to. But she joined the squad and about 22 other members and not signing on to that letter. So for me, it was very personal making this film. I say that this is my life's work. There's nothing that's as important to me. There's nothing as personal and as existential to me. And I've thrown every ounce of my energy into this project over the past 18 months. I have not slept. I don't know how I'm still standing. I'm running as fast as I can. We're trying to get this film into education and create impact screenings and all of the things. So this is a very, very long answer to your question, but about the hope. I tried to make a film that wasn't going to have people wanting to jump out of a window at the end of it. You don't want a film that's going to end on a total downer. You just don't. And it doesn't. To me, it really doesn't. To me, things are grim and it's heavy and there's a lot going on in the world, but we're ending on allyship and we're ending on young people. And these young people in the film are so charismatic, they're so poised, they're so affirmed in their identity. They're so proud and courageous that to me it's very hopeful. Even though on the other side it's very noisy, they're loud, they're creating chaos wherever we go. There is a lot of hate out there, but I would argue we have a lot of friends out there too.
So first of all, you should know that your lack of sleep and your running for 18 months has been wildly fruitful, because that film is so masterfully done and has been so well received by everyone who has seen it. We rented out a theater here at AMC for 80 people who saw it. For us, our family saw it. Our son was in Israel when it came out. He came home. We watched it with him again. And it is a masterpiece, and you should know that your hard work is really well received by everyone. And it's important to take that pause and victory lap as you should. When did you know you were going to do this film? I mean, you have pieces of data in that film from minutes after October 7th, obviously, but October 8th. Did you know on October 8th or 9th something was up here and that you were testing the waters, or did this come about a little bit later?
I knew pretty much within the first 10 days. I got a text from a friend. So October 7th, I'm in Madison, Wisconsin. October 8th, I'm still in Madison, Wisconsin. I go to a vigil with the students. There's hate on the other side, but it's not that aggressive. But when I saw what was happening in Times Square with people blaming Israel for the attack on itself and celebrating Hamas as freedom fighters rather than condemning them as terrorists. And then we saw what was happening on college campuses with Harvard and more than 30 student groups blaming Israel, again, for the attack on itself. And then it was Cornell and Penn and Tulane, and it was just the domino effect. But it wasn't just the hate, it was the silence. It was women's organizations. It was UN Women. It was social justice organizations. It was my own professional network. I am part of a very high-profile women's group of media and technology and entertainment, and you would know a lot of these names of these women. And they are so outspoken on every other issue. They were outspoken about 2020 and George Floyd, and we all had to, we weren't forced to do these like anti-racism, conversations, but we were encouraged. And they're outspoken about immigration, and they're outspoken about the Muslim ban, and just all of it.
And Boko Haram.
Boko Haram, bring back our girls. And there was silence after this, so much so that on October 8th, this group that I'm a part of, they have an Instagram account, they had a social media manager who arguably knows nothing, and she's very young, and she reposted the paraglider image that came out of Chicago from the
Pride March, yeah.
Yeah, from the
BLM.
Thank you, BLM. She reposted the paraglider, and I'm calling the head of this network, this organization, who happens to be a Jewish woman who went to NYU. And I'm saying, Anne, what is going on? Take this down. Do you understand what this is even about? And she just refused to acknowledge just how anti-Semitic all of this was. So a bunch of us actually defected from this group. So it was happening on a very personal level for me. But I got a text from a friend. I would say it was October 16th, maybe 15th, maybe even a few days earlier. And she said, this is a friend of mine who is I would say barely Jewish. Maybe it's gone to Israel once, with her kids' bar mitzvahs, and texted me, I feel bereft. And to me, that was it. It was I'm not just feeling gutted. This is a universal feeling. There is a generational trauma that's being unleashed in the Jewish community, and it doesn't matter how Jewish you are. I feel it at a DNA level, at a cellular level, it's happening. And so I started writing a treatment for the film at the end of October. It was October 25th. I think I could look at my Google Doc. And I started shopping it around to the different production companies where I had worked, and everyone passed. No one wanted to take it on. After I had done Surge, I thought, I'm just never going to do this again on my own because it's a terrible business model, making a documentary film. But here I was. So end of October, and I started booking people for the film. The first person I reached out to was Congressman Richie Torres. He's amazing, and everyone should always applaud for him because he's incredible. I guess we don't clap in here, but you should all clap for him. He's incredible. I reached out to him, and I went to Dan Senor next, and I went to Deborah Messing, and I just started going down a list. And ultimately, I interviewed more than 80 people for the film. Only 38 of them made it into the film. But I filmed in Israel. I was in Israel at the beginning of January for 9 days. I went back to Israel in June, and I just kept going.
So I want to talk about this notion that people passed on it, and something also that once the film was done and you're looking for representation, you're looking for all the promo, all the things that's going to fuel a book, a film, anything that we do in the public arena. You had a fascinating phenomenon happen to you, and it was shocking, not surprising, or maybe surprising, not shocking. It was as if it was foreign, but I totally understood where it was coming from without understanding it, where all of these people, many of them part of the Jewish tribe, said, oh, this is fantastic, way to go, very proud, I love this, no interest in touching this. Don't want anything to do with this. I don't remember ever seeing something like that before. I remember people saying, look, this is not something I'm interested, or this is something I want to jump on board with, or lip service, but never that, yes, you go, girl, don't get me near this. What's that about? It's like a hidden thing, I'll support you from the sidelines, I don't want to be seen in the crowd.
That's pretty much it. You encapsulated it perfectly. Listen, I think that there's some reality to it. Part of it is just commercially. People didn't think that they can make money from it. But I would argue that more than a commercial success or flop, it was, we can't touch it because it's too political. Political Jewish, sympathetic to Israel. It's too hot, it's too nuclear, it's too radioactive. We don't want to get into the fray. It's ugly out there. We know it's ugly out there. We don't want to be canceled. We don't want to lose followers. This is where celebrities are silent. But the streamers aren't going to touch it. That's what I heard over and over. Netflix won't touch it. Hulu won't touch it. Max won't touch it. Paramount Plus is already doing something. So that was the other thing. One and done. So once We Will Dance Again got distribution, it was, oh yeah, do you know how hard that was to make happen? It took like, a force, like it was like, it was a consortium of people getting involved in production companies. It took Sherry Redstone, it took Susan Zirinsky at CBS, it took all of these outside players to make that happen. And guess what? After that happened, CBS and Paramount got so much hate internally from their Muslim affinity groups, so much hate to take it down. This is actually more stuff that I've recently sort of unearthed as to how ugly it got over at Paramount. So it's just so much easier to not touch it. I mean, right now, I am getting so much hate from an interview that I did. I mean, I get hate anyway, but anyone who interviews me could be in the line of fire. And I did a radio interview with a radio host in Montreal about a week ago. So Canada is ground zero for anti-Semitism. If we think it's bad in New York, you just go to Montreal. It's like a nightmare there. And I went to Montreal twice because of that. I saw the videos when people were blocking theater goers from going to see my movie, and so I decided I should just go again, and I did. And so at one of these screenings, a radio show host was not Jewish. There was a lot of like ally screenings happening in Montreal with members of parliament and the indigenous community and all sorts of people. So this radio show host came, and he had no interest in doing anything about the film until he saw the film, and then he met me. And so we did a interview about a week ago. It just aired probably 3 or 4 days ago. And the hate started flooding in. The hate that he didn't challenge me. I'm a propaganda machine. Hating on the Muslim community and the Palestinians and the students. And by the way, in Canada right now, they have this anti-Palestinian racism or Palestinian racism, something or other. But it's part of their sort of infrastructure now of like DEI, and anti-Palestinian hate falls under that umbrella. And so I'm accused of being a hater. Anyhow, this radio show host is an older guy, but he's, very, very well known. Got spooked. The radio station is trying to defend him. Same thing happened, but he wanted me to know. By the way, I'm getting all the hate too. Same thing happened when I was on basically the morning, their Today Show version of Toronto. That segment was back in the early April, and it was a Jewish guy doing this segment. It was a great segment. It was short. It was 3 minutes compared to like a long radio interview. But same thing happened. There was all of these calls to get this anchor fired, and he got really freaked out. And so on the other side, the NGO hatred group here, I said, Michelle, anyone who knows her, she runs NGO hatred. I said, you guys need to help this guy. And there was a whole letter writing campaign to support him, and they were sending all these emails and phone calls and everything over to the station to defend him. But this is what's happening. Also, you have police here, every synagogue in America, every Jewish day school has to. I have to have security now at screenings. It's the craziest thing. Not when I go alone. I'm never asking for security. I'm not actually worried for my personal security. But what's wild is when we do these screenings, wherever I am, in Mexico, in Canada, here in the States, if UJ or any group is buying out a theater, there has to be security and metal detectors. And I've been telling all of the press, like, no other land, the film that's won the Academy Award, that's very sympathetic to the Palestinian situation in the West Bank, there's no line item in that director's budget for security. And now we have to have security. And it's insane.
It is insane, and it's surreal. I was at a special program, a mass in memory of Pope Francis at St. Patrick's. And it was open to the community and rabbinic leaders. We came, and it was beautiful. It was 2 days after he died. And we all just walked into the church, right? I mean, thousands of people in the middle of the night. We just walked in the church, and I thought to myself, my goodness, it really is a radical difference. And the fact that people can't even wrap their head around that is crazy. The part of the film that I know everyone talks about, and I'm not going to be an exception to that was really groundbreaking for me as a viewer, was the scene that brought us back to Philadelphia in 1993. The FBI was surveilling a hotel, a Marriott hotel, with Hamas operatives, and basically every piece of October 7th and 8th that happened on the propaganda machine against Israel and Zionism was basically laid out in that hotel room as how it would play for the next 30 years. Could you talk about what that moment was for anyone who hasn't seen it, and basically how well executed that machine has been running for the last 30 years?
Yeah, that's a really just revelatory scene in the film. And just, I don't know how, I won't go too deep into the filmmaking piece of it because I don't want to bore you guys, but we were deep into production and into editing when I got that interview. It's Lorenzo Vidino. He's the head of extremism at GW University who tells us and lays out this scene for us. And just one thing I want to note is it was really important to me in this film to include a lot of non-Jewish voices. I wanted a diverse group politically, but not anyone too extreme, because this is not a political film. I wanted people who are very, very credible. Credibility and integrity is everything, because at the end of it, I'm a journalist. So Lorenzo Vidino, I had been stalking for months because I saw things that he had written about. He's not Jewish, although I wasn't sure that he wasn't Jewish until after the interview. I didn't ask him. I wasn't vetting him, and I didn't know from anything. But Italian guy who runs the head of extremism at GW. And it was June of 2024. We'd already cut all of our SJP scenes. We had scenes that we had worked on for months. And I'm interviewing him, and all of a sudden he tells me about this FBI wiretap at a Philadelphia hotel room, a Marriott hotel room, in 1993. And how Hamas in America, who, by the way, Hamas in 1993 wasn't a designated terror organization yet, but there were eyes on them. And what this long conversation reveals, and we were able to actually get it pretty easily. We didn't have to file a FOIA, Freedom of Information Act. We were able to find it pretty much online. It was very easy, and we had translators translate it all for us. But what Hamas is doing is they're figuring out how to make their language more palatable to an American audience. How are we going to infiltrate American institutions in the media, in universities? How are we going to sort of like snake our way in to America? 1993. And they said, when we're speaking to people on the left, we're going to speak in terms of apartheid and social justice and colonialism, right? Like they know this is like the language of the left. What you don't hear in our scene, because we cut it down for time, is they also said when we're speaking to people on the right, we're going to talk in terms of the founding fathers and patriotism. So they knew what they were doing. They were playing the long game for decades. So it's no accident what we see on October 8th. And I think a lot of people, people in the Jewish community in particular, felt like, oh my God, how did this happen? Like what all of a sudden this is explosion, and how are all of these campuses so organized? How are they so strategic? Anyone who's following stuff online on social media saw the language is similar, the flood the streets, flood, the Al-Aqsa flood, like everything is like in lockstep. The language, the iconography, the upside down red triangle, this is like blew my mind also. When I was like, I thought I knew a lot. I didn't know any of this stuff. So the upside down red triangle is a symbol that Hamas uses when they're targeting the IDF soldiers. And that symbol has been appropriated by SJP and student, pro-Palestinian groups on campus. And so when you're seeing graffiti being tagged at the University of Pennsylvania on the Benjamin Franklin statue, and on Starbucks stores, and on synagogues, and everywhere right now, that is Hamas. And people are like putting stickers on themselves as they're at these rallies. So SJP has been playing the long game. Hamas has been in lockstep, and Hamas, it's all, we showed this like diagram, a Venn diagram of sort of the connection between American Muslims for Palestine, the Muslim Brotherhood, SJP, Hamas in America. And it's all connected. And by the way, I do want to just point out, this film is so legal to death. We can't just say things. So when I have an expert who says Hamas is in America, I went back to him 3 times and I said, show me the proof. Because we can't just say that. So even though the haters in Montreal and whatever are saying that I'm spewing lies, it is fact checked to the T. We have evidence, and everything that is out there on this film is absolutely accurate.
So everyone has something in a film or a book that sticks with them the most. The part that stuck with me the most is exactly what you just spoke about from that hotel room, and that was the horseshoe diagram. that when you're dealing with the radical left or the radical right, you're really dealing with the diagram of a horseshoe. And the idea of the horseshoe is that these two extremes aren't so far from each other. And basically, their phraseology, the language triggers that they use might be a little different, but the goal is exactly the same. And to me, that was one of the most compelling diagrams in the film. I want to change a little bit to society, if we can. If we blend together three thinkers, so we blend together Galloway, Rachel Fish, and Jonah Platt. Jonah Platt says we're up against an algorithm and we're going to lose. Galloway says, on TikTok, for every pro-Israel piece that the algorithm throws our way, you're going to get 50. That's 50 to 1 an anti-Israel that's going to influence young people's minds. And Rachel Fish, who's a professor at GW who deals with Zionism and Jewish history, she has a very interesting approach, and I wanted to pick your brain on this, Wendy, because you're looking at this from two angles. One, from the journalistic side, an accomplished person who has done incredible research for this film, but you're also a mom of college-age kids. And Rachel Fish says, cut this generation off. Lick our wounds, move on, forget them. We're not going to turn this battleship around and start over from scratch with another generation. Now, she's not an ignorant woman. She's a very thoughtful human being. She comes to this with a lot of history, and she argues that trying to change that generation is going to be a fool's errand. I want to pick your brain on that because no one wanted to jump out the window at the end, and yes, we do have allyship, but the mountain seems so steep, and we can't even see the clouds, yet alone the peak or the summit. What do you agree with or disagree with when it comes to fighting the algorithm that Jonah Platt's talking about, Galloway, really kind of in a moment of despair, or Rachel Fish's idea of just moving on to a different generation because we're not going to affect the change in these young people that have been indoctrinated on these college campuses?
That's a big question. Okay, I am much more of an optimist, and we're not giving up on this generation. That to me sounds insane. What are we going to sit around and just wait another 20 years? Like, that's crazy. I do believe it comes down to education. My film, it needs to be in all of the schools, right? So everyone says it, and they're like, okay, we get it, this is great. We need to get outside of the echo chamber. 100% agree, which is why I'm trying to raise money right now for the education and the impact campaign for the film. I'm talking to companies about creating curriculum to cut down not only the film to match teaching materials, but to get into schools. I have 170 hours of footage. You saw a 100-minute film. I have 170 hours of footage. Every scene could be expanded to 10 or 15 minutes or become its own documentary. I want to use that to teach kids. Like, we need to extend the whole, what anti-Zionism is and what anti-Semitism is today, right? And how it's morphed. Like, that is so fundamental to getting young people to understand what this is all about. So I'm much more optimistic because I feel like I've done the work and I've got materials and let's go, let's get it out there. And I do know just from even doing screenings with young non-Jewish people, it moves the needle. I mean, the haters are going to hate, right? Like, as Taylor Swift so beautifully says. But there's so many other people in the middle, so I'm not giving up. Now, I do think that social media is, that's the devil that we're dealing with. And, so it is getting young people to understand, to think a little bit more critically and challenge what they're seeing. But we can't not fight back. We need to keep punching back. And again, I think the young people, I think one of the upsides of that's come out of October 7th is that, I'm going to say a cliche, but I do think that on October 8th, diaspora Jewry woke up. My original tagline in my deck for the film when I was shopping it around was, on October 7th, Hamas attacked Israel. On October 8th, American Jews woke up. And we've come together, and we're not sitting back anymore, and we're not complacent, and we're not asleep at the wheel, and we're thinking, what do we need to do now? And instead of people donating and putting their names on buildings, as Jews have done, on libraries and on hospitals and at all the universities, we need to do what Qatar has been doing. We need to do what the Saudis have been doing. We need to get into the curriculum. We need to own the curriculum. We need to put the money behind chairs and fellowships and get into academia. We also need to get into K through 12. So that's also my next project called Poison Ivy, in case you were going to ask me what my next project is. But it's all about academia. And so it's unpacking how we got to this moment in academia.
I love the title. So let me share 3 statistics with you and everyone here that should stymie us, like kind of blow us away. 30% of young Jewish Americans are more activated in their Jewry on October 8th, exactly what you said. 30%, that's according to a recent Pew study, which means that all of the factors we've invested for decades before were really fruitless, and it just takes some good old-fashioned Jew hatred to activate that citizenry. That's number 1. Here's 2 other astounding statistics from this Pew report. 53% of all Americans of all stripes and backgrounds have a disfavorable view of Israel. 53%. 70% of all Americans have a favorable view of Jews. Meaning that for most people who are not part of the Jewish tribe, they see Israel and Jews as separate, and we see them inherently connected. What can we better do to explain that Zionism and Judaism are clearly connected, as is evidenced by that first statistic of the 30% arousal after October 7th?
First of all, I didn't know all of those statistics. The unfavorable view of Israel, that I'm familiar with, but I didn't know about the 70% favorability rating about the Jews. So that's heartening. I don't know. I think most people don't understand what Zionism is. I think that Jewish people don't understand what Zionism is. It's become a dirty word. It's sort of like, to me, how, like, there was a reclaiming of the word feminist. That was such a dirty word also. It was, like, weird. It had its own connotations. And then all of a sudden it became very in vogue to be a feminist. We could argue about other language. So yeah, I think with Zionism, first of all, we need to start with the Jewish community to really understand what it is and make sure it's not a pejorative. And then it's also, again, going into education and understanding, like, all of these other civil rights movements. I mean, Zionism is just a civil rights movement for the Jewish people. That's all that it is. It doesn't mean that Palestinians can't have a homeland. It doesn't mean that any other people can't have a homeland. It just means it's the civil rights movement for the Jewish people. And if we could just have a simple, it's not complicated, you guys. It's very easy. It's, by the way, it's been around forever. It's not a new thing. The Return to Zion, which we try to, emphasize in the film, again, isn't new. It's not a 1948 idea. It goes back thousands of years. And I think even more important to Zionism, or equally, it's part of the same conversation. Let's own that Jews are indigenous to the land of Israel. The indigenous thing is so important. When we have to, always claim land, and they do this in Canada all the time too. It's like you have to say, I'm on Lenape land, or just, paying tribute, because that's been sort of part of the culture now. Okay, Jews are indigenous to the land of Israel, full stop. No question. And any non-Jew, any Christian who went to Sunday school should know that also. So I think we just need to really own it. And what is interesting, though, are the Jews within our community who are really opposed to this idea. I don't think they're definitely not, and you would know the statistics, they're not the majority, but they can be loud too. And they're tokenized by the other side. And that comes up over and over and over again with me, with questions that I get. And the bad reviews that the film gets, inevitably, if they're not written by Muslims, they're written by, this, what I would call a self-hating Jew.
Richie Torres has this great line. He said, could you imagine someone saying, I hate Puerto Rico. I hate the way they treat the people who are native and visitors. I hate the land. I hate everything about I hate the weather. I hate their system of governance. I hate that they're not a state, but they act like a state. I hate the way that the airport is run. I hate the stench there. But I love Puerto Ricans. Puerto Ricans are wonderful. He says it's the most absurd sentence a person could say, but that's tantamount to what the anti-Zionism love of Israel is. And I think we need to come up with a more creative way, exactly as you're saying, to get in front of these things instead of playing defense. Rule number one in journalism is you own the story, we write the story, but someone else has been writing that story for us. So with the 170 hours that you have and all the research you've done in the last 18 months and running in such a winded fashion, what's your prediction for the next 3 months and 3 years? How's this going to shake out? How does it shake out with our relationship with Israel? How does it shake out in this administration? What's the future hold for us?
Another big question, Rabbi. Looking into that crystal ball, listen, I think anyone who's following what's happening in Israel, it's pretty ugly right now. It feels like the country is imploding politically, not culturally, but politically. And it's really heartbreaking. I mean, it feels like I'm not Israeli. So, and just to digress for a second, I also just wanted to make this film as a diaspora American Jew who has the privilege of being here in the States where my college-age kids are not serving in Gaza right now. And I was really sensitive to that because our experience here is not their experience. And I think that's really important to note. So I also don't criticize Israel, in the same way, like, who am I, right? Aside from watching what's happening unfold and realizing that it's pretty ugly, and I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. And, I think every expert out there says that. I think here, and I don't like to get political in these talks because everyone has different political views. I think that what we're seeing with the Trump administration on college campuses is they are stepping up, but things are definitely red flags to me too. I think there's an overreach, to be honest, and there's going to be a backlash, and we're already seeing that. To the Jews, because using anti-Semitism as the excuse to do what you want to do is not necessarily a good thing. With that said, things need to happen. And so my alma mater, Northwestern, is one of the universities under the microscope that's also getting their funding withheld. I could not champion that more. And I'm in touch with the president of Northwestern, Michael Schill. He and I email. He's Jewish. I did a screening at Northwestern. The actor David Schwimmer from Friends came to that screening. He wanted to talk to Michael Schill, but guess who didn't show up to that screening? Michael Schill. He wanted me to do a private screening at his house. He didn't want to come to the public one because it was just not convenient with his schedule. I'm actually going to do a bipartisan congressional screening on Capitol Hill on Monday night.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, thank you. And I think that this is really important. Listen, it's not political what's happening, but what's happening is also becomes politicized. So that's what's concerning. But I do think that the university presidents are looking to do something to be, first of all, they don't want, billions of dollars of money withheld. So I think we're going to see some good movement. And again, I think students are also deciding and parents are deciding where they're going to send their kids to school. So I think we're going to see changes with that. I do think the South is looking a lot more like a positive place for Jewish students to go rather than the Northeast schools that have been so hostile. One of the things I'm exploring in my next project is also what's happening in graduate schools, like the medical schools are really hateful. There's like anti-Semitism baked into medical schools. And after I've done so many screenings across the world at this point, and people come up to me in the States to tell me what's happening in the medical schools, sociology departments, psychology departments, in the grad schools also, where anti-Zionism and this oppressor-oppressed, it's the oppressor-oppressed binary. That is part of academia right now.
So I'm going to just quibble with one little thing you said, and that you talked about the privilege we have that our kids aren't fighting when the other ones in Gaza are. And it's true, they're not, but we both have children on campuses, and I know from your family, similar to my family, that they're fighting a different war. And I remember saying on October 8th that all of us are going to have to fight that war. And it starts with the simplest act of putting up a lawn sign to a little bit more fierce of an act of showing your courage at the water cooler. And you have been a general in that war for us, because you have taken your gifts and your skill set and you have brought a very powerful shield and weapon to the masses that we can turn to and rely upon. And it's been a gift for all of the people who love Zion, whether you're Jewish or not. And on behalf of all of us who are here, and so many who aren't even here but who share this sentiment, I just want to pause and thank you and bless you for that incredible gift that you have given our community.
I want to just jump into the student thing, because I think this is actually really important. So obviously I did a whole film about students being harassed and threatened, and that's really what this film is about, from what was happening here. I had 2 Israeli editors who are based in Los Angeles who edited the film. To me, it was very important to have Israelis editing the film and different perspectives. And I also hired non-Jews in my production team. Also very important. I wanted to see what was going to move the needle. I wanted to see what was like not just interesting to me, but what's going, and I had people of different ages. Okay, so I had my Israeli editors were my main editors. I had a non-Jewish junior editor. I had the first producer I hired, who's like 30 years old, not Jewish, waspy, like obviously not, I would ask people politically sort of where they are in this kind of stuff, like do they have strong feelings? Very, very, very important to me. And with my Israeli editors, when we were looking at I did 80 interviews or 82 interviews. I think 38 of them are in the film. I interviewed 20-something college students and graduate students. Only 7 made it into the film. So I was looking for the most compelling stories. And through the more cynical Israeli lens, they would look at these students and say, okay, are these stories bad enough, basically? They were very sensitive to, and I hate using the word whiny because it's a terrible word, but for lack of a better word, people like the whiny Jewish student on campus. And that's what some of them felt like. Not that they were great kids, but their story wasn't strong enough. As a filmmaker, I also needed a strong, compelling story arc. So it was not until February, like I had done a whole bunch of interviews in December. I did like 10 interviews with kids who I was seeing. They were testifying on Capitol Hill. They were at all these congressional hearings, and I was calling them up, and I was like, oh my God, I need you, and I need you, and I need you, because you're amazing, and like, look at what's happening at Penn, and look at what's happening all these places, and they're poised, and now I've got great congressional testimony footage and all of this stuff. And then it was in February when I saw on Instagram that picture of Zionists Not Allowed that Tessa Wexler was holding up, that Deborah Messing had reposted. I did not know Tessa Wexler until February. Again, I had done so many other interviews. And then I see Zionists Not Allowed. And that picture stopped me in my tracks. It was like, holy, and I won't say the word, but like, oh my God, right? This is insane. And I started stalking Tessa, and I started like DMing her on Instagram saying, I need to interview. And then her story just kept growing and became sort of even more incredible. In April, there was that recall election. She was the student body president at UC Santa Barbara. And here she is being targeted. And at the Multicultural Center is where they posted the sign, Zionists Not Allowed. So it's like the irony of all of that. And now we have a really strong story. So this is more than I'm walking through campus and I'm feeling unsafe. This is targeting, harassment, bullying at a whole other level than I'm just not feeling comfortable in my classroom. And that, so it was interesting because, again, I think it's so important that we're really driving the points home with our strongest sort of ammunition and data and storytelling and profiles of people for others to really understand what's at stake. Like, it's not just kids complaining that they're not feeling safe, because I think that safety has been a thing not just for Jewish kids, I mean for this generation of like they're all bubble wrapped and God forbid they feel uncomfortable and they feel threatened and all of that. That language has been used way too much. When we're talking about targeting a minority, like it would not stand for the Black community or the Hispanic community or the gay community or any other community except when it comes to Jews.
Well, I realize I concluded, and now we're jumping back into it for a minute, but sorry.
Sorry.
It feels like any one of my sermons. one other piece on that I think is compelling, and that is, the Cornell story, which we were all familiar with, this Asian American student who created this tremendous hate and fear where Jewish students were locked in their dorm rooms. They couldn't go out to a dining hall, kosher or non-kosher. They couldn't go to the library because they were afraid for their physical safety. They were told they were going to be raped, killed, thrown off the cliff that is part of the cornerstone, if you will, at Cornell. The most damning part of that story to me was not Jew hatred. It was apathy. And that not one non-Jewish student, there's not one story that I found, because I also did research on this for work I was doing on it, not one non-Jewish student is their testimony who knocked on one Jewish student's door and said, we're going to go eat together, and if they're going to hurt you, they're going to hurt me too. Not one. And to me, that has been the biggest gut blow, something I actually draw disagreement with on Van Jones when he talked about this recently in one of his podcasts, because when cops put a knee on George Floyd's throat, we said, not on our watch. When Asian hate was coming around like a virus in this country in the wake of COVID, we said, not on our watch. When you dial back to 1962, and you're going to Philadelphia, Mississippi, and voters' rights, and Schwerner and Goodman said to Cheney, not on our watch. And then when it's our time, there's crickets. And half of those crickets come from people who weren't wired the way we are to be advocates, and the other, just like the people who said to you, hey, we don't want to touch this. We don't want to be with it. We wish you well. That has been the most painful part of this entire process for me. The silence from my ecumenical clergy who have just been out to lunch, not calling and checking in, not saying let's be there, just not in that moment, and that has been a really painful moment. And I think that painful part has been a gut blow to our students as well, because these students who were friends with Arab kids and black kids and Asian kids and part of that multicultural mix were then put on the side. That has been a gut blow to these students on college campus, speaking in the first person as a kid on campus dealing with these very issues. I don't know if it's been the same for your child also.
My kids didn't feel it as much, but yeah, I think that abandonment is very real for the kids. I interviewed a bunch of students who talked about that. One actually, her scene didn't make it into the film, but she, University of Michigan student, fluent in Arabic, Middle East studies. She was actually really, really, I don't know if she'd say her best friends, but very close friends with the young woman who is running the SJP on campus at Michigan, who I follow on Instagram now too. I mean, they were very close up until October 7th. So that abandonment is real. And I think we all feel, I mean, our entire Jewish community feels it. I mean, I think that's also what just rattled people so much, after October 7th.
Well, I know that you have a child graduating from university very soon, and on behalf of all of us, we just want to say thank you. As I tried to say a minute ago, is my fault. I just want to thank you for your work. We're really excited and eager to have you back to talk about Poison Ivy when it hits the streams. If people wanted to catch the movie and have it or show it to their neighbors and friends, it's streaming on Apple TV.
Yeah, it's on all of the paid video on demand platforms: Apple TV, YouTube, Amazon, all of those platforms. It's not on. We haven't been picked up by a streamer yet. That's another thing. I'm looking for global distribution right now. We just found out that we have a small distributor in Germany and in Australia and in Israel and in Latin America. So I am going to all of those places. And the UK, we're having big problems. No one wants it in the UK. We've gone out to 4 distributors. The BBC said no. All of these other places said no too. So it's still, even though the film's doing well and we did well at the box office, like it's pretty hard out there still.
Well, if Germany picked you up, it gives us all hope for the future. Please join me in thanking Wendy for being with us.